think many Magic the Gathering players would agree if I said Ancestral Recall is, if not one of, the most powerful spells in all of Magic the Gathering. Ancestral Recall is 1 blue for an instant that says draw 3 cards or force opponent to draw 3 cards. Artwork originally done by Mark Poole, the card conveys simplicity and evokes power. The reimagining of the card for the 2013 Vintage Championship winner is just as evocative. Simply saying target player draws 3 cards, the text is simplified, but the power is the same. From its design stage and conception, Ancestral went through some notable changes that lead to some fun trivia. Originally, the effect was meant to be a green spell and referred to as Earth Lore, but that was given to an enchant land in Ice Age. And an alternative name was also proposed at one point, Ancestral Memories, but that was ultimately given to a blue sorcery in Mirage. But one piece of trivia that stands true to this day is that it is the best of its cycle. The Boon Cycle, which also contains cards like Healing Salve, Giant Growth, Lightning Bolt, and Dark Ritual. Cards that see play, the latter few especially in the formats they're legal in, but Ancestral Recall stands above them all as it's banned in most formats, restricted in one, but Card Market's article describes the cycle best and how Ancestral stands in it by saying Ancestral Recall offered something a bit harder to come by: card draw. For years to come, the card would go down in infamy, joining the reserve list and becoming one of the single best top decks in the Vintage format. Wizards of the Coast would spend years trying to recreate just an inkling of its power. They would do this by adding stipulations to the draw, or replacing the cards drawn with some filtering or information. But why was it that important? Are the 3 cards drawn that powerful? Many would say that those 3 cards could just be lands, and arguably Black Lotus is a better artifact because it provides you 3 mana that you could do more with.
I hope you're happy.
You know, Francine, when I really think about it, I am.
But it really comes down to the potential of the cards drawn, trusting that the cards you will find not only provide you with more resources than your opponent, but give you the consistency you need in your game plan to overcome the odds. With many more later iterations like Brainstorm being prolific in Eternal formats, these cards ended up being banned outright in Modern, another fetchland format where many Modern players thought that the era of drawing 3 cards would be forever locked away for them, especially at such a cheap cost, but that changed with the release of Core Set 2012. Visions of Beyond is 1 blue for an instant that says draw a card. If a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, draw 3 cards instead. A lot of text, a lot of cantripping, a lot of card draw, but a lot of power in its potential. And just as apt is the flavor text. The past is the foundation for all that exists in the present. We merely reconstruct what our ancestors have already discovered, the wise words of Sachemir, Sage of Memories. And that's really what this video is about. Understanding what Mill must do, what Mill must reconstruct, what we must grasp to hold true to the power of the formats around us, whether they be standard or something as powerful as Vintage. Visions of Beyond represents the reach across time in order to showcase its true potential. During that release, you may know a small creator and player by the name of Louis Scott Vargas, who wrote an article on Visions of Beyond, noting it to be a fantastic control card which cycled early and also was an explosive value proposition in the late game. Going on further, he harnesses his inner milled mind, noting that a self-mill strategy could also be powerful, with Hedron Crab and Vengevine making Visions of Beyond the central glue that provided the late-game draw engine. This of course led to the building of a modern classic, Crabvine, which opted for cards like Thought Scour or Glimpse the Unthinkable to feed the yard and didn't necessarily rely on draws for long games. So where did Visions of Beyond go? Luis was of course on the right track because it's a mill card. It wants you to feed a yard, whether it be yours or your opponent's, but mill for years has situated itself in the lower recesses of the modern metagame as a fringe idea that folks only joked about at their local tables, barely recognizing it as a strategy if they ever played against it. Jumping ahead here, we know that's not true anymore. We know that modern players tend to sing a different tune when it comes to modern, because Mill is a formidable deck in the modern format now, flip-flopping between tier 2 and tier 1 status based on the metagame over the years. The archetype thrives due to additions such as Ruin Crap or Tasha's Hideous Laughter, but there ultimately was a central piece that kept it all together. As many of you may be aware, milling your opponent is attempting to win by manipulating the most random aspect of the board state. which is the order of the library. And while many other decks will work to maintain powerful board states with intricate planeswalkers or just overwhelm you by cheating out powerful spells, Mill has had to use spells that affect the one zone in the game that honestly the gameplay isn't really built around. Burn decks place cheap and efficient damage sources at your face. Control decks will counter your spells and slow down the game. And mid-range decks will outvalue what you do card for card, but all of those decks will ultimately win through taking your life total down to 0. Whereas mill decks have to count to 60, sometimes more depending on the sideboarding methodology. That means card disadvantage is built into the archetype, as we can't affect life in the same way.
We girls are different. We have to be pampered because we're delicate and refined.
Milling 20 cards doesn't really mean the same thing when your opponent is dealing 20 damage to you, so interaction has to be peppered into the strategy as well. Remember that mill is not a burn deck at the end of the day, it's closer to combo control these days, so you have to have stopgaps for when your opponent gets too far ahead. These cards ultimately dilute the mill plan, however. On one hand, we're playing from behind, so we have to work on a different axis, and therefore need more mill spells on average to keep up. But on the other hand, if we're just casting mill spells, our opponent's just going to overwhelm us with their win condition. This is where Visions of Beyond fits in. This is where Visions provides the future, the power of Ancestral Recall to an unassuming strategy, a condition to be met rather simply. In an archetype that looks to fill graveyards, Mill looks to harness a mere fragment of the Power 9 to provide itself raw cards, more mill spells, and just more ways to end the game. What this means is mill players ultimately look to fit in.
Hey, fresh dudes, mind if we chill your crib? What?
And when modern players are reanimating whole graveyards on turn 3 or creating miserable board states with the creations of Urza, it can feel like mill players are speaking a whole new language. But whether it be more archive traps to punish our opponent's fetch lands, crucial sideboard pieces like Crypt Incursion to reduce creature strategies to something trivial, the raw cards drawn are truly the difference between winning and losing. And that's the extreme that Visions of Beyond represents. A card which must mimic the power of times past to keep an archetype relevant. It showcases the value harnessed in a strategy working on an axis to which no modern deck could ever mimic. A card exemplifying the beauty behind the madness of mill. But I'll leave it up to you, the viewer. I know that many mill players are actually shaving copies of Visions of Beyond these days. Deck lists are tight and you can only play so many copies. And of course with cards like Jace the Perfected Mind providing a very similar effect on its -2, we have many effects that can mimic what the card does as well, but its value can't be undermined either. Are you playing Visions of Beyond in your mill deck, or are you content with the value that you get out of your 60 cards? Thank you everyone for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, I encourage you to leave a like on the video and comment down below what card you want to see me highlight next. Again, this is part of a longer series of highlighting cards that I love, maybe in mill, maybe in modern, maybe in magic. And until next time, I hope you know the impossible is possible, and as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.